Welcome to Safety Chats. Host Jason Starke, Director of Safety at Baldwin Safety and Compliance, shares decades of aviation experience and a passion for safety. Let's get started with this week's Safety Chat.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Baldwin Safety Chat. This is the podcast where we talk about everything safety management or safety or just how we can do our jobs just a little bit better. And I would say it's starting to look a little bit like Christmas. For our friends in the northern part of the northern hemisphere, you're probably looking a lot more like Christmas than we are down here in Houston, but it kind of makes me think of the end of the year. Traditionally, New Year's Day, we all have the habit of making New Year's resolutions, and we have the habit of making goals, things that we're going to do in the new year. I want to talk again about objectives. Objectives are important. They're super important in terms of moving the needle on safety in the organization, and also super important on expressing leadership's desire to improve safety in the organization. You may say, well, how is that? What do objectives really have to do with leadership? I first want to talk about objectives that matter. There are so many things that we can do to improve safety in the organization. Things that don't take a lot of money or things that probably do take a lot of money, but everywhere in between, there's things that we can do to improve safety in the organization. There's two kinds of objectives, more or less. There's what's called outcome-based objectives, and then there's process-based objectives. And outcome-based objectives, as the name implies, are objectives that are aimed at changing an outcome. So we look at outcomes as things that the organization can't necessarily directly control. Things like unstable approaches, slips and falls in the hangar, maintenance errors, pilot deviations, you name it. These are the outcomes. These are the things that happen. And ideally, the things that happen, the things that we're looking at and measuring are low consequence, high probability. So again, that would be something like an unstable approach itself is low consequence. In and of itself, it could lead to something higher consequence, but in and of itself, it's lower consequence, but there's a higher probability of it happening. And so we like to look at those and measure those, but those are outcomes. Okay, those are the outcomes of a certain activity or a certain process. We as an organization don't have, I would say, direct control over those items. For example, we can't say today we're going to have one fueling error, or tomorrow we're going to have two towing mishaps that lead to hangar rash, or tomorrow we're going to have one runway excursion. We can't say that, just as simply as we can't say with 100% certainty that we're going to have no mishaps tomorrow. I mean, that's what we strive for. That's what we hope for. We have a lot of controls in place to help prevent that, but we don't have direct control of that unless we shut the doors and did absolutely no activities that had no outcomes. Then we could obviously control and say we could have zero outcomes. What I do want to talk about outcome-based objectives and specifically process-based objectives. And what ICAO recommends, and I recommend it too, but if you have an outcome-based objective, the organization has to do things in order to influence that outcome-based objective. So for example, let's say you have an outcome-based objective to reduce the number of tools that are left behind in an aircraft. You're an MRO and you're getting a lot of customer complaints of tools or other paraphernalia that are left behind the aircraft, pieces of safety wire, rags, you name it. And let's say you have a lot of those. So you would obviously have a safety objective to lower that. You want to minimize that. You want to take that down. Now, saying that we're going to have zero and make that your objective, well, is that realistic? I don't know. That's a question we have to ask, because when we make our objectives, we like to follow the SMART acronym, S-M-A-R-T. So your objectives, whether they be outcome-based or process-based, they need to be specific. They need to be something you can measure. And you measure with what's called a safety performance indicator, or SPI. It's something that has to be attainable. And that's where you have to ask the question, is zero an attainable objective? If you're going to stop the operation to where there's no more outcomes, then quite possibly it could be zero. But if we're still going to continue business and have outcomes, it might be very unrealistic to say zero. A lot of times we like to say at or below a lower number and then gauge it from there and maybe even try to move the needle a little bit more. But the point is that you have this outcome-based objective, right? You want to reduce something, increase something that isn't under necessarily direct control of the organization. So what you're going to need, like I said, is to do something that can influence that outcome-based objective. For example, this would be what would be called a process-based objective. These are things the organization could do to increase safety capacity, to influence the outcome of a certain activity. So in the case of the tools left behind in an aircraft, you can say we're going to instate 100% visual inspection by another mechanic or an inspector after each job to see if there's any tools or paraphernalia left behind on the aircraft. You can say we're going to have that fully implemented by a certain date, and you can measure about it. You can measure the percentage of implementation to see to where you're 100%. But that is what we call the process-based objectives. So that is where you are doing something to influence an outcome. Because if we just say, hey, we want to reduce the number of tools and stuff left behind on an aircraft to a certain level by a certain time, we can't just put that on there and graph it and hope the data moves itself magically to our objective. That doesn't even make sense. We can't just hope it or will it to our target, which would be the stated objective is your target. That's what you're trying to hit, and that's your safety performance target. But we need to do something about it. So ICAO recommends, and I fully agree, that for every outcome-based objective, you should have some process-based activity associated with it. So you can show that you are doing something in order to move that data, to move that point to its desirable level. Now, here's the other side of it, though, too. So in ICAO, every outcome-based objective needs to have a process-based activity. However, every process-based activity doesn't necessarily have an outcome or an outcome-based objective. It could just be a matter that you want to implement things just to overall increase the safety capacity of the organization, which is a good thing. So it may be we want to implement a fatigue management program, and you can measure the percentage of implementation, or we want to ensure 100% of our line service individuals are NATA safety first trained by a certain date. That's a SMART objective, and that is, again, something you can measure. Is it affecting an outcome? Possibly. Does it matter which one? No, but we are really increasing the safety capacity of the organization. That's what that's about. And when you can document these objectives and you can publicly put them out there, and by public I mean in the organization, or you may want to share them with your other stakeholders, I don't know, that's up to you, but when you document them and show the measurements associated with them, you're actually helping to hold the organization accountable to achieving those objectives. Let me explain. So if the organization says, we're going to ensure line service or maintenance professionals have a certain hearing protector, a new hearing protector, we're going to issue them to all line and maintenance individuals by third quarter of 2023. And so you're going to measure the percentage of line service individuals and maintenance professionals who have received the new hearing protector. And so you have your objective there, and then you have the measurement associated with it. So kind of picture that in your mind's eye. Okay, maybe you have a poster or something like that. And let's say for the next 4 months, it's like completely flat. There is absolutely nothing. And employees are going to be like, yo, what the heck? I mean, come on, you said you're going to do this, and it's flatline. There's absolutely no progress towards this target, which is 100% of the line service individuals and maintenance professionals receiving this new hearing protector. And that's kind of embarrassing for the organization if you think about it, that if they're going to put a measurement up there and the thing is flatlined, it's like, well, what are you doing? Why even put it up there? You know, is it just lip service, or are you actually doing something? And that is what the importance of documenting your objectives and showing the associated measurements and then putting there for everybody to see. Those should never be a secret, ever. So now the question, how does this really express leadership's desire to improve the organization? First of all, if you're monitoring a risk control or you're monitoring something with an SPI and you notice it's at a level that's increasing or a level that's not acceptable to the organization, we have to go to leadership and say, we've got a problem here and we need to do something about it. And this is usually done like at the level of the safety committee, but we say, this is what the data is showing us. It's suggesting that we may have an issue and we may need to do something about it. And then leadership will say, okay, well, let's find out why this is happening. So that should be an investigation trigger, obviously. If you have an adverse trend, that should spark an investigation. You do your investigation, and then you come back and say, okay, this is the reason why we're having more of X, more of Y, less of Z, whatever that outcome is. This is what I suggest we do about it. Now, when you provide your suggestions, and we, I mean as safety managers, it is only leadership that can say, okay, we are going to give you the tools, the resources, the people, whatever you need in order to implement that objective. and that would be the process-based objective. First, leadership has to help you determine, okay, the acceptable level where that data needs to be at for the organization. That's on the outcome side. That will be the target of that objective. And then on the process-based side, leadership has to agree and provide the resources for the things that need to be done to influence that outcome. We cannot do it without leadership. There has to be leadership involvement. And that is how it is an expression of their desire to improve safety in the organization. First of all, it's the fact that they recognize that there's a problem and that it needs to go down to a safer level, and they help define that level. And then secondly, they're providing the resources and they're providing the tools and the people in order to make something happen to influence that data in a positive way. By leadership doing that, that shows that they are engaged and they want to improve safety in the organization. So here we are now coming to the end of 2022. 2023 is coming up, and I would encourage us to go look at the objectives that we made in 2022, whether they be outcome-based, process-based, both. I encourage that this is a good time to review them. Do they still make sense? Have we obtained our objective? If we've obtained our objective, we can pat ourselves on the back and archive it. And if it's an outcome-based objective, you may just go back to monitoring that. So let's say it was tools left behind. It was at this one level. You've now taken it down through organization actions. You've taken it down to another level. Now you can just sit there and monitor it and see what the data does with these new things in place that resources were used to influence the data in the first place. Hope that makes sense. So with 2023 coming up, now's a good time to look at your outcome, your process-based. Did you meet them? If not, why not? What else do you need to do to meet them? And then I'd encourage you, at least on the process-based side, come up with one or two other good objectives, things that you know will be rewarding in regards to safety, things that will increase the safety capacity of the organization, things that will really help build a safer environment for where we operate, for ourselves, for our employees, for our other stakeholders, so that everybody can go home at night. And that's kind of the point, right? We want everybody to go home in one piece at night. Take a look at those coming into 2023 and think about the things that you think you can do to improve safety in a certain area in the organization or in the organization as a whole. Maybe it's implementing a new piece of equipment. Maybe it's implementing a new software. Maybe it's getting people trained on a software. Maybe it's getting people trained in their profession. Maybe it's sending more people to simulator training. Maybe it's sending people to NATA Safety First. Whatever it may be, decide it. And then importantly, get leadership on board, the nod from leadership, because anything you're going to do is going to need resources. Get them on board, get them to say yes, and then state that objective, put the measurements against that objective, and put it out there for everybody to see. Start making progress towards those objectives and try to hit that target by the date that you have stated. And by doing that, people will see that the organization cares and people will see that leadership cares. So I hope this all made sense. It's just a really good topic, especially at the end of the year. I know sometimes we get confused on safety objectives, how many we should have, what they should look like. I hope this helped a little bit. Just so you know, too, in 2023, one of our objectives was to have another in-person class. And it looked like that's going to happen in February here in balmy Houston. It's teaching us safety managers how to do the practical side of our job. It's not theoretical. Check it out on our website, see if it's something you'd like, and certainly ask me more questions about it. Drop me a line. Let us know how you like this podcast. If there's anything we can change, anything we can do, we are here to serve you. Thank you so much for tuning in and listening. Thank you so much for what you do out there, for helping to keep organizations safe. And in the end, always be safe.
This podcast is brought to you by Baldwin Safety and Compliance, the leader in safety management for the transportation industry. Since 2004, Baldwin has been providing state-of-the-art solutions and 24/7 support to the aviation and transportation industries. Baldwin's clients include all sizes and types of transportation operators. Baldwin provides safety and related business services to commercial and non-commercial transportation operators, medical transporters, FBOs, MROs, airports, flight schools, UAS operators, firefighters, OEMs, ground transport operators, and others. Visit BaldwinSMS.com to discover how Baldwin can enhance your organization's safety program.